The Russia-Ukraine conflict has emerged as one of the defining geopolitical challenges of our era, with profound implications for international security, economic stability, and the rules-based global order. As peace negotiations unfold with the Trump administration's pressure for a resolution, nations across multiple continents are carefully calculating their interests and positions. From Washington to Moscow, from European capitals to Beijing, the potential outcomes of this conflict will reshape regional power balances and test the resilience of international institutions for decades to come. Today we analyze the complex interplay of interests, strategies, and constraints facing key global actors as they navigate this high-stakes diplomatic terrain. The roots of the current conflict trace back to Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, followed by Moscow's support for separatists in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region. In February 2022, Russia escalated dramatically with a full-scale invasion, triggering an international crisis marked by Western sanctions, massive military aid to Ukraine, and a global energy price shock. After 3 years of brutal conflict and hundreds of thousands of casualties, the front lines have stabilized somewhat, with Russia controlling approximately 20% of Ukrainian territory, according to data from the Institute for the Study of War. Donald Trump's return to the White House in January 2025 has fundamentally altered the diplomatic landscape, with his administration actively pushing both sides toward a negotiated settlement, rather than continuing the previous policy of sustained military support for Ukraine. According to research from the Atlantic Council, any settlement likely involves Russia's continued occupation of the currently held Ukrainian territory, with some analysts drawing parallels to the partition of the Korean Peninsula following the Korean War in the early 1950s. The Trump administration initially promised a swift end to the conflict, with the president famously claiming during his campaign that he could secure peace within 24 hours of taking office. Reality has proven more complex. According to Reuters reporting, senior Trump administration officials now acknowledge that securing a Ukraine peace deal is likely to take months rather than days or weeks, with growing frustration toward Moscow's resistance to negotiations. The administration's strategy appears multifaceted, applying economic leverage through threats of secondary tariffs on Russian oil buyers, temporarily suspending military aid to Ukraine to push Kiev toward negotiations, and engaging directly with Putin in what Trump describes as leader-to-leader diplomacy. Trump's approach has sparked controversy both domestically and internationally. Critics argue it favors Russian interests and abandons Ukraine, while supporters believe it pragmatically acknowledges military realities and prioritizes ending the human suffering of continued conflict. In March 2025, the administration proposed an unconditional 30-day ceasefire which Ukraine accepted, but Russia initially ignored, highlighting the challenges in translating American diplomatic pressure into concrete results on the ground. Trump's personal rhetoric has raised concerns among U.S. allies. On April 14, 2025, he made statements blaming Ukraine for being invaded, suggesting they shouldn't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size, and then hope that people give you some missiles, as reported by The Economist. Russia's approach to peace negotiations reveals a complex, multi-layered strategy aimed at maximizing territorial gains while minimizing international repercussions. According to a Washington Post report citing a document from an FSB-linked Moscow think tank, Russia's maximalist demands include recognition of sovereignty over seized Ukrainian territories, creation of buffer and demilitarized zones, and, well, the complete dismantling of the current Ukrainian government. The Kremlin has seemingly concluded that time works in its favor. The document obtained by European intelligence and reviewed by the Washington Post stated that a peaceful resolution of the Ukraine crisis cannot happen before 2026, and dismissed Trump's preliminary plan for peace within 100 days, as frankly, impossible to realize. Military operations continue despite diplomatic overtures. In April 2025, Russia launched missile strikes on the Ukrainian towns of Sumy and Kryvyi Rih, killing dozens of civilians, according to The Economist reporting, even as peace talks were ongoing. Russian President Vladimir Putin appears to be testing Trump's resolve and patience. accepting the philosophy of ending the war according to Trump envoy Steve Witkoff's statement to CNN, while simultaneously presenting increasingly maximalist demands that would leave Ukraine with little meaningful sovereignty. Ukraine finds itself in an increasingly precarious position, balancing between diplomatic necessity and existential concerns about national sovereignty and security. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy faces immense pressure both internally and externally. According to NPR reporting, Zelenskyy is, extremely anxious about the prospect of negotiations, as characterized by Tim Willesee, a visiting professor at King's College London. Ukraine's acceptance of the American proposed 30-day ceasefire in March 2025 demonstrated Kyiv's recognition of changing political realities, particularly the shifting Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal articulated Ukraine's position succinctly, stating, "We will continue to work with the US through all available channels in a calm manner. We only have one plan, to win and to survive," as reported by Reuters. Territorial concessions remain Ukraine's primary concern. The Trump administration has indicated discussions about dividing up certain assets, which Ukrainian officials fear means legitimizing Russia's control over occupied territories without adequate security guarantees. Ukraine's August 2024 offensive into Russia's Kursk region was likely a strategic move to gain bargaining leverage for these precise negotiations, according to analysis from Seth Jones of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, cited by NPR. European nations have responded to the changing American approach with a combination of alarm, pragmatism, and increased regional coordination. British and French leaders have proposed creating a European reassurance force to help Ukraine after a potential ceasefire, demonstrating Europe's willingness to take greater responsibility for regional security in the face of America's potential disengagement. This proposed European contingent would avoid direct confrontation with Russian forces by staying away from front lines, instead focusing on training Ukrainian forces and conducting joint air patrols in western Ukraine, according to reporting from The Economist. Poland's Foreign Minister, Radek Sikorski, warned that the Kremlin was mocking American goodwill, highlighting European concerns about Russia exploiting Trump's desire for a diplomatic victory, regardless of the terms, as reported by The Economist. The European approach reflects deep anxiety about potential American withdrawal from European security commitments. According to diplomatic analysis from the Atlantic Council, Europeans are attempting to take up the burden of European security while hoping to preserve some level of American commitment to NATO, if not to Ukraine directly. Multiple European diplomats have reported that some Trump administration officials privately express being fed up with Europe's efforts to strengthen Ukraine, according to The Economist, suggesting growing transatlantic tensions over burden sharing and strategic objectives. So, China has maintained strategic ambiguity throughout the conflict, carefully balancing its so-called no-limits partnership with Russia against its, economic interests in keeping stable relations with Europe and the United States. According to diplomatic observers at the Council on Foreign Relations, Beijing actually sees the Ukraine crisis as, an opportunity to advance its vision of a multipolar world order, one that's less dominated by American power and Western institutions. Chinese President Xi Jinping has time and again called for peace talks, but he's avoided direct criticism of Russia's actions. This, in a way, positions China as a potential mediator, while at the same time providing economic lifelines to Moscow through increased trade. Recent reports from Reuters indicate that Xi has urged Vietnam and other Southeast Asian nations to, quote, cooperate in preserving global supply chains amid disruptions caused by U.S. tariffs, which really highlights how the conflict intersects with broader economic tensions. The outcome of the conflict will, without a doubt, significantly influence China's strategic calculus regarding Taiwan. According to national security analysts at the Hudson Institute, Beijing is closely watching Western resolve and unity in response to territorial aggression, seeing Ukraine as a possible precedent for future regional conflicts. Middle Eastern nations have approached the conflict through the lens of energy markets, security dynamics, and their relationships with great powers. Gulf oil producers have benefited from initially higher energy prices caused by the conflict, though recent price declines from around $80 per barrel in January to $65 currently, according to The Economist, have reduced these windfalls. Turkey has positioned itself as a mediator, hosting Russian-American diplomatic talks in Istanbul in April 2025, while maintaining its strategic importance to NATO and establishing itself as, an independent diplomatic power. Israel has maintained a cautious position, balancing its Western alliances against security concerns regarding Russia's presence in neighboring Syria and its own ongoing conflicts requiring international attention and resources. Arab nations have largely avoided taking definitive positions, with many maintaining diplomatic and economic ties with both Russia and Ukraine, while focusing on regional stability and food security concerns arising from disrupted Ukrainian grain exports. Several potential peace scenarios have emerged, each with distinct regional implications and probability assessments from international analysts. The Korean model scenario, referenced by multiple think tanks including the Atlantic Council, envisions a frozen conflict along current battle lines, with Ukrainian NATO membership off the table and European security guarantees replacing American commitments. A delayed resolution scenario, aligning with the document obtained by the Washington Post, suggests Russia will deliberately extend negotiations through 2026, hoping for favorable political changes in the United States and Europe. The European security reconfiguration scenario involves the creation of a new security architecture with a European-led peacekeeping force in western Ukraine, while Russia maintains control of eastern territories but faces continued sanctions and isolation. Most security analysts, including John Herbst, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine cited by Reuters, consider a comprehensive peace agreement highly unlikely in the short term, with temporary or partial ceasefires being more realistic immediate objectives. According to Seth Jones of the Center for Strategic and International Studies cited by NPR, any negotiated pause could mirror the Chechen wars of the 1990s, where a ceasefire in 1996 was followed by renewed conflict 3 years later as Russia rebuilt its military capabilities. The Russia-Ukraine conflict represents more than a regional dispute. It fundamentally challenges post-Cold War security assumptions and tests the resilience of the international order. The ongoing peace negotiations illustrate the complex interplay between great power competition, regional security dynamics, and the limits of diplomatic leverage in resolving territorial conflicts in the nuclear age. As global actors recalibrate their positions based on the evolving situation, secondary impacts continue to ripple through energy markets, food security, defense spending priorities, and trade relationships worldwide. What's your assessment of how these peace negotiations might affect global stability? Do you believe the current approach will lead to sustainable peace or merely a temporary pause in hostilities? Has this analysis changed your understanding of any country's position or strategic interests in this conflict? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this global analysis valuable, please subscribe to Omni for more in-depth, balanced perspectives on critical international developments. Like and share this video to ensure others have access to this comprehensive breakdown of a complex global challenge.